So I have a question for you that pretty much goes on in everyone's head, which is how did you actually land your role at Google? How does the whole process work?
I will tell you how I got the role. So back in the day, in talent acquisition, Google used to hire contractors or temps, and these would be 11-month contracts. And some people would get tapped on the shoulder to go through what was called a conversion process. So I was thankfully one of those lucky
Okay.
few that got asked to convert. And I'm glad I did because I stayed on for 10 more years after that.
Hello, and welcome to our podcast, Skills Headquarters, where we speak about the current trends and practices in HR and talent acquisition. This podcast is brought to you by Zapilio. Zapilio is an AI-powered, data-driven skill assessment platform.
Welcome to our podcast. Today we have the privilege of hosting Indu, a brilliant woman and an accomplished expert in the talent acquisition field. Indu's expertise has been honed through a diverse career, which includes her notable tenure at Google in a leadership role in talent acquisition. Welcome, Indu.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
We're thrilled to have you on the show. But before we delve into specific topics, could you share with us a bit about your background and the areas of talent acquisition that you specialize in?
Yeah, definitely. Excited to be here. Thank you for having me on the show. So my background and experience in talent acquisition spans at this moment over 2 decades. I've had the pleasure and the opportunity to be involved with. I first did in-house recruiting in India, then moved to the US, and for over a decade, I was part of staffing agencies and the consulting space. Um, and then I joined Google, and at Google, I had the absolute privilege of being involved in various different roles, part of talent acquisition, but the early part of talent acquisition. So talent identification, so to speak. So I did some
Okay.
sourcing, managed some sourcing teams. I set up research operations teams. I worked in program management to make our talent acquisition processes a little bit more efficient. Helped set up our applicant tracking system, led referrals for a bit. And then I actually left Google and went to a startup where I did a bit of leading
Sure.
recruiting, a little bit of recruiting ops, employment branding, etc. So kind of the whole gamut. But yeah, here I am.
That's awesome. I think your experience, especially at Google, has been very impressive. So I have a question for you that pretty much goes on in everyone's head, which is how did you actually land your role at Google? How does the whole process work?
If I tell you the process the way it was when I joined, or even what I saw in the subsequent years, that's probably already outdated, right? They're constantly evolving and changing how they hire. But I will tell you how I got
Uh,
the role. So back in the day, in talent acquisition, Google used to hire contractors or temps, and these would be 11-month contracts. And some people would get tapped on the shoulder to go through what was called a conversion process. So I was thankfully one of those lucky few that got asked to convert. And
okay.
I'm glad I did because I stayed on for 10 more years after that. So yeah, I'm happy
Yeah.
that that's how it went.
But how did you even get the contract? Like, was it there was no after school placement, right?
Oh no, I was like long after school by that time. I had been
Yes,
over a
exactly.
decade
Like you
of,
had a
yeah.
job in India, you moved back, you moved to the States.
I had a couple of friends who had, so at that time, because they were hiring contractors, they would hire a lot of contractors. And I had two friends in particular who had also joined Google a few years before me. And they actually would keep asking me to agree to consider. And I was a little bit wary because it was a contract. And I didn't want to leave a full-time staffing agency job that, I have a full-time salary and I have benefits. And why would I leave this and go to a
Yeah.
11-month gig? Remember, this is pre-gig economy, right? This is pre
And
where people were, I'm from the
they
generation
would
where we
prefer
needed,
security.
yeah, you prefer a
Yeah.
job, like a
Yes, of
full-time job.
course.
So I
Yes.
kept saying no, till one of them convinced me to, she was like, look, you just have to give it a shot. So I said, okay, fine, let's give it a shot. And I am so glad I did because I think from the outside, I think maybe there's a little bit of like, oh my God, this is going to be difficult. And oh my goodness, it's Google. But then getting in there, it was like, I think in my career, by far the best experience that I had.
I'm sure that's. I mean, it is one of the top in the world. So
Yeah, yeah.
I completely get that. Okay, so let's delve into a subject that is very close to both of our hearts. So my first question to you would be, how would you describe psychological safety, and what does it mean to you?
This is, I mean, like you said, it's a topic really close to my heart. I've seen it play out in multiple ways. So let's first
Okay.
talk about, psychological safety. What is it? Basically, it's a
Yes.
belief that the team is a safe place to take a risk, that you can speak up, you can make a mistake, and you're not going to be punished for it. That, if I did something wrong,
Uh-huh.
um, it's okay, and I'm allowed to take that risk, and I'm allowed to be different or speak up. This is different from trust. Trust would be more of, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt that if I do something wrong, you're not going to react. But then psychological safety is where others are giving you the benefit of the doubt. So it's kind of opposite ways. And
Yes.
then, let's talk also about why is this important. So there's a lot of study and research that's been done around this topic, just around like what makes teams effective and what makes teams, produce better or work better together. And
Uh-huh.
psychological safety always lands as by far the number one factor that impacts team effectiveness. So when teams are feeling safe, when teams are feeling connected, they're more engaged, they're more motivated. And when there's safety, there's more innovation, there's more overall,
Yeah.
far more effectiveness.
There's more risks.
There's more risk.
Yeah.
There's definitely much more,
Yeah.
you show up as you, right? You show up not
Yeah.
worried about something is going to happen if I say this. Like what if I say this? What if I can't? Psychologically safe teams will allow you to,
Yes.
yeah,
I feel like there is so much work to be done in this area yet. Like the whole concept and everything is also, it's not like dated. It's so relevant in today's
it
age.
is.
Like if you speak to my parents about psychological safety, they would be, they're like, the kind of generation that would be like, just be grateful that you have a job. Like our generation, I feel like would always keep psychological safety before financial safety. I feel like it. Like I personally wouldn't stay at a job where I feel like, and I did, like I left a job where I did not feel like I had the space to be myself. I had to, everything was super micromanaged as soon as like our boss changed, but that's a whole different story. And it was no longer a place where you could be yourself. It was a place where you had to pretend to be what your boss wanted you to be.
Right.
So I completely understand that, like the whole concept of how it is so important for us to feel safe. Like we feel safe at our home, so we are ourselves. The same way, if we feel safe at our workplace, we will be our best professional self. Like it isn't really
Right.
that difficult to.
Onus for this to such a large extent lies on those managers, right? And look, I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do because managers sometimes get stuck in between with, what's the directive or what's the vibe coming from top leadership and how do they want to run their team. So sometimes the company needs to have this as an explicit priority, right? And if it doesn't come from leadership within the company, then it's really hard for even one team to make it a psychologically safe
Me
environment.
that, yes, that's
Yeah,
true. But I still feel like it takes one leader to start.
it does take one leader to start. You're absolutely right.
It is more about the work culture, right? In the end.
No, so it is about the work culture in the end. It's about who gets put in those leadership roles. What is their priority? Because very often, and I'm sure you've seen that, I've seen that, very often a good individual contributor becomes a manager through promotion or something, but just getting that role or that level or that title does not make them a good leader, right? So I think there's sometimes there's a huge difference between a leader and a manager, and sometimes it's very crucial to put leaders in place who can set direction, who can provide clear leadership, who can create culture. And I think that's where sometimes a lot of companies end up faltering.
Messing up. Yes, I agree. Even though that person is really great at that job, it doesn't mean that they're a good leader. But just out of curiosity, I wanted to understand, how do you think Google handled this? Like, I know that they're renowned for their emphasis on psychological safety, and they have publicly implemented strategies to cultivate a supportive and an inclusive work environment. So, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to a couple of anecdotes at Google. Um, it's a learning process. I'll also go through, as we do this, I'll also go through kind of what does a manager need to do to even create psychological safety, right? We'll come to that. But at Google, so Google's a place where there's a lot of people analytics research that goes on. So they're constantly like trying to learn, how teams operate. And there is project you can go Google it. There's a fantastic search site called Google. You can go Google Project Aristotle. You can Google team effectiveness, even psychological safety. There's a lot of reading out there. But that said, what I've seen at Google is it's a learning process, right? I joined Google when it was not the big mammoth of a company that it is today, or even was when I left 2 years ago. So there was a lot of stuff that was still nascent and still being learned, still being kind of researched and practiced. There's a lot of data that gets collected. There's a lot of research that goes on. As managers, we had to go through not just a lot of training. I mean, yes, there's a lot of training, and a lot of companies will do manager training, right? How do you become a better manager? How do you give feedback? How do you receive feedback, etc. But Google also did extra things like there is an annual survey called the Upward Feedback Survey or the Manager Feedback Survey. It used to be called Upward Feedback, then changed to Manager Feedback, which was where your team gave feedback about you. So it makes sure that the managers are getting feedback in a documented way as well. That gets input into the manager's performance feedback. So there's a critical component of how are you as a manager that comes in. So with that, there's always going to be people that are fantastic. So I've had personally managers who were, a dream, right? Early on, had managers who put me into roles, or even, for example, going through being a temp to converting to full time wouldn't have happened if I didn't have a manager who didn't see that potential, right? If a manager feels threatened by you being around and you having the potential to have a decade-long career at Google, I may not have had that chance. But the fact was that I got that opportunity. I got pulled into solving problems that I didn't think I had in me. And there were times that I would get asked to a meeting with said manager or director level people, and I'm still a temp, and I would be afraid to go into that meeting wondering why I was called in. And then I would be given like, so we are dealing with this, what do you think of how should we solve this? And I'd be like, me? And they'd be like, yeah, I mean, we see that you have a good vibe of how things go on and you're able to come up with innovative solutions. We want you to come up with an answer. And so it was just, it builds your confidence as well. And it makes you feel like, okay, so they're asking me for my opinion. It's valued. I'm valued. I'm allowed to speak up. At the same time, I've had managers where you go into a one-on-one and you can very clearly see that the manager is anxious. Manager's probably not confident in their own ability. And, that's a fairly common thing as well. Like, how many of us have that self-confidence of saying, yeah, I got this, especially when it's a number-driven role and your production every quarter is counted, right? So I remember walking into one-on-ones where my manager would be like, how are you going to do this? And I'd be like, I'm hoping you can help me, but if you're not confident in how I'm going to do it, then how am I supposed to be confident in how I'm going to do it, right? So don't rub your anxiety off on me because that's not helping me. It's a big task that I have. So at Google, you see the entire gamut, you see the entire range of experience. But the important thing is to, make sure that a manager knows how to create that environment that is safe. Be very self-aware, be very open to getting feedback, etc. And I think that's kind of an important area.
I've had my fair share of both as well. I've had a boss who was a dream. She was each, there were around 7 to 8 people, I think, in our team. And not just one, I've had like 2, 3 bosses that were so good that you would be comfortable to go and tell them like things that you would normally not like. I could go to her and be like, share a personal example of why I'm not feeling good enough to work today, and she will be like, okay, you know what, why don't you skip today and we can cover it up on Saturday, or you can cover it up next week, and if the work is redundant and can be given to someone else, she would do it. And the team knew about it, and the team would like, ourselves would be like, hey, you know what, you're not feeling good today, let me take that up from you. And
Right.
that flow was created because she made space
Yeah.
for everyone to be their vulnerable selves at work.
Yep. Yep.
And I could go on and on about how she was a work mom, and not just to me, to like people who were in their like late 30s and late 40s, who would call her a work mom because she was so amazing.
Yeah.
And but on the other end of the spectrum, I've had bosses who are very intense micromanagers. I think maybe it comes from a place of not having faith in any of the members of the team, or not
It comes
having
from
faith
not
in
having faith
themselves
in
as a
themselves.
leader.
Yes. That's where it comes
Yeah.
from.
So they would rub it off on you and like make you responsible for the outcome, even though you're the boss, you know? And you're right, the anxiety rubs off and it's very disabling, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
disables you to give your 100%, and it just adds to your worry. Like, they're not the kind of boss who would be like, you know what, I got your back, go and do this. They would
Yeah.
be the kind of boss that if you don't get this done, it could be escalated and you would get fired, you know?
So what does that manager do? What should a manager do to create an environment, right? The easier or the weaker thing to be is the, if you don't get this done, it'll get escalated, you'll get fired, I'll lose my job, you lose your job. That's the weak, pass the blame off to someone else. It's not me, it'll come from there. The more difficult thing to do is to say, I got your back. I am going to champion you, be your voice, even at the table where I have a seat and you don't, which means with my seniors, I'll have your back and I'll pound the table for you if I need to. I got you, right? And how do you do that? I mean, you have to be very acutely aware of what's going on. And to your point of you being able to speak to your manager about not feeling good on a certain day. Now, my philosophy as a leader always has been, I can't expect you to, if there's something going on in your life, you're going through a personal crisis, you're going through a health crisis, you're going through something, some anxiety, something happening. I can't expect you to walk in through that office door and leave that part of you outside and come in and function fully, right? So it's better for me to understand that you're bringing this cloud of thing with you. How can I help you best? How can I put my arms around you? And well, not physically, but how can I, help you best operate with everything that's going on in your life? If that means, okay, we'll take it up next week, or let's assess what's on your plate, what is critical to get done. Can you focus on this? We'll do this. Someone else will do it, or I'll do it, or whatever, right? Be willing to show vulnerability. Be very willing to be vulnerable in front of your team, because if you're not, then how are they going to be vulnerable in front of you? I can't pretend that I have nothing going on in my personal life and I'm all completely professional and completely robotic, superhuman, because I'm not. You're human, I'm human. I have stuff going on as well. I have emotions, I have anxieties. But that said, as a manager, my role is to not let my anxiety rub off on you. Yes, be vulnerable, but not in the, oh my goodness, how are you going to do this? Always solicit feedback, take input. I think my biggest moment, or one of the things that I'm very proud of, is at Google, is this team that I set up in India. I moved to India for 2 years and I set up what was called a research operations team. And mind you, this was not something I've done before. So it wasn't like I have 10 years of experience doing this kind of work. No, it was someone's trust that I could do it. It was someone's trust that I understand the process well enough to be able to go set this up. I would be able to do it, which gave me the confidence. Now, I couldn't show up in India and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. And therefore, I don't know what all of you are doing either. So my thing was, let's write out or draw out a flowchart or a process of how I think this will work, which is what I did for the first few days. Locked myself in a room, drew on the whiteboard. Then I called in my direct team that I was hiring, a couple that I had inherited, and then I was hiring into the room saying, this is what I think. What am I missing? Please poke holes. And they felt empowered to be able to tell me things that I may have missed or could be doing differently, which they did. Then we called in the broader team, like their teams, and said, you're the ones who's going to actually do this work. This is the process that you'll follow. So A, we want you to look at this and tell us if we've missed anything, because, I'm looking at it theoretically. My team has looked at it from their experience, but their individual contributor team members are the ones who are actually doing the work. They'll know if something is repetitive or redundant or not necessary or, in the wrong place or whatever. And then I would periodically solicit this feedback saying, okay, it's been a quarter. You've now been doing this. How can we make this process more efficient? Because we started off with something in a way that we thought it should be done. Now that you've been doing it, what are ways that can be automated? And that was just fantastic. I mean, I think, be open to taking feedback. There were things that I had missed. And if it's easy to sit on one's ego and say, I'm absolutely right, and this is just how it should be done. But then that's not what's good for the team. And the team, you lose. You completely lose. The other thing to do definitely is, and we talk of feedback. I mean, one is you solicit feedback, be open to that feedback, but then you also give feedback, right? And that's where this concept of radical candor comes in, which also you and I have talked about, which I absolutely believe in. I mean, it's I think one of the most important things to do as a leader and a manager is operate in the quadrant of radical candor. Like if you look at
Radical candor.
think of it as a x-axis, y-axis quadrant, right? On your x-axis is, are you able to challenge directly? And on the y-axis is, do you care deeply, like care personally, care deeply is on your y-axis. So on the top left, that you care deeply, but you're not challenging, is what they call ruinous empathy. Okay. Which basically means, I'm just being nice to you. You've done something wrong. I'm not going to say it to you. Your button is open in a meeting. I'm not going to tell you because I don't want you to feel bad, right? I just want to be the nice person and I'm not going to tell you anything. On the bottom left quadrant corner would be, I think they call it malicious, nothing. I mean, you basically don't care. Malicious insincerity,
You
I
don't
think they call
care,
it.
and
You're not doing anything. You're just there because you're maybe a good
organized.
IC yourself. And so you're in that role, right?
Yes.
The bottom right quadrant is just aggression, right? It's just you're challenging directly, but you don't care. It's intense. That they say actually could be the second best thing to do because at least you're challenging, right? You will not be, people will get used to. But the best thing is obviously radical candor. Like you care about them, you got their back, you give feedback in the moment, give feedback personally. Don't make it like formal. I have to write this down, document it down, one-on-one documents, this, that. It
That's
should be
very counterproductive.
Be very specific. Don't personalize it. The feedback is not necessarily about the person. It's about
how
the
they
event or
worked, in that particular project or during that particular time, of course.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, I think.
So the thing is, if you connect all of this back with our topic of psychological safety, when there's poorly delivered feedback, that's very harmful for psychological safety, right? It makes people, your teams are left feeling either defensive, offended, vulnerable, or
anxious,
like basically like anxious, everything.
Depressed.
And what happens at the end is they leave, right?
To your point earlier, they're burnt out and they leave.
They're burnt out, they leave. Who cares about the money that's coming in? Who cares about the name brand of the company? I don't feel, again, there's research, right? We can Google it. People leave their managers, not their companies. So when people leave, they leave mostly because of a manager. And, so that role is so important that people don't, I mean, it's also a big ego kick of getting a leadership role. But it is such a crucial role to develop these people, that career development piece, the psychological safety piece, the, being candid piece, that it's actually a difficult role to fill.
It is. I think it is. Yes. I have also noticed that people who are extremely inclined to work a certain way with themselves independently and struggle with collaborating or trying new things, but are successful. Even if they're doing it their way, they're successful and they get promoted. So when they're promoted, they have it set in their head that my way is the best way. So
Yeah.
they will never look at like 10,000 other ways that the same thing could be done, which other employees are, implicating. But maybe they're not at 100% successful, but they're at 95. Like it's not the method that's wrong, but some other tweak, or maybe the amount
Right.
of efforts that are put into it. So this leader will now be like, no, stop your method and copy mine, instead of being like, let's find out what's wrong in your method and push it as well along with mine.
Right. One of my early learnings at Google, when I first became a team lead at Google, when I first started managing sourcing teams, I had gone from being an individual contributor myself. And I mean, not like I was saying this is my way is the right way and nothing else, but I was just very used to jumping in myself to, we have this search to do, I'll jump in and help you. And I would be giving very often my team members, new manager here, inexperience in that department, I would be giving them lists like, hey, I found this candidate, maybe reach out. Maybe I'm not reaching out myself, but I'm giving them the candidates. And that same psychological safety, good manager that I mentioned earlier, one time in my one-on-one with this person, I said, so I did these searches and I've shared these lists with these team members. And he said, that's very good that you're doing that. But have you thought about maybe teach them how to do it so that you're not doing it for them? Teach them, because that'll free up your time to learn and do things and grow in your career. Otherwise, you'll be doing their job for them. They're not learning what you got to teach them. You're not making space to learn more things that you could be doing better in your career with. So have you considered maybe just pass that knowledge on to them? And that light bulb was such a huge light bulb that kind of like, duh.
So important.
Yeah. So important and so simple, right? So simple.
Yeah,
like
so simple.
So,
but you have to relinquish control to do that.
You have to massively relinquish control. You have to massively relinquish IP, right? Like this is how I've done it.
Yes.
But the thing is, when you start seeing your team members grow and do well in their careers, it's such a massive pat on your own back.
It is.
It's so important to even do that. And then around that same time, I remember I'm pulling lists, giving them to my team members, right? My managers told me, teach them how to do stuff. I'm probably still learning how to let go and teach and relinquish control. So I'm still micromanaging to a large extent. And this is where I'm being vulnerable. My very first manager feedback survey, Indu scores very high on micromanaging. So I remember, and then the right thing to do when you get your manager feedback survey is like read through the analysis that the team sent you, the people analytics team has sent you and everything. And then pull your team together and say, I see what you've said. Thank you very much. I'll work on these things. And I can't tell you how difficult that is to do right in the beginning.
I can
or
imagine.
The very first time.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't think I'll ever forget that one meeting. Like my knuckles were cold. My palms were sweaty. Like, oh my God, I have to stand there and tell people, thank you for this feedback. And you think I'm a micromanager? Like, how do the words come out of your mouth, right? But then it's such a moment of learning and growth when you allow yourself to be vulnerable and speak the words.
Human.
And I don't think I ever again after that got a micromanaging score. Like I don't think I ever got.
That's amazing.
Because that was the one thing that stuck, right? Like
this
I
is
can't.
rare.
Because I was just embarrassed. I was super embarrassed
of course,
that, that I take pride in being creating an environment which is safe. And look here, I'm helping my team out. And then I'm told that they look at it as being micromanaged. So I learned to let
Micromanaged.
go.
Yeah.
I'll also be honest. I mean, there were probably still times that I wanted to still have control of a project or be on top of what's going
Uh-huh.
on. But that came from much more of back and forth, just conversations with one-on-one teams.
Yeah.
And and then it also became this joke where Indu remembers things and Indu doesn't forget things. So especially when it is sourcing teams and they have their own list of candidates, it was bad for them. We'd joke about it. But I would get into one-on-ones and I
Yeah.
remembered names of candidates that they've told me the last 2, 3 one-on-ones, like, hey, what's going on with so and so? And there were times that they'd look at me like,
Oh,
why are you asking? I don't have an update, or it didn't go well or whatever. And then they'd be like,
yeah.
so then I learned to make that a funny thing of, I'm not trying to micromanage this. I have not looked at your list before coming into this meeting. That's just me. I just remember these names. And, it's okay if you tell me you don't have an update. That's fine. But I'm here. I'm not
Uh-huh.
trying to just be this micromanagey manager.
I feel like this is a very parent thing to do. Like, you know how parents are like, sometimes they're wrong because they're human.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
Many times.
yes, yes, but they wouldn't come and apologize. But like this happened with me recently. I got into a fight with my mom about something, and she didn't talk to me for like 3 4 days. And I didn't think like I was not the one who was wrong at this point. But it was my brother who explained to me that she's human, she can make a mistake. And I was like, I know that she's human and I know that she can make a mistake, but can she acknowledge it and accept it that she's human and she can make a mistake? That's where, like, it's not that you make a mistake, it's not that you micromanage, it's the fact that you accept that about yourself and then you work on it. And I feel like it is so much more difficult for people at seniority levels, always had a certain reputation or who everyone has an idea about, like this person is perfect, blah blah blah. But then there is a small thing that comes out about them and they feel like they don't want to tarnish relinquish control or tarnish the quality of work that they have submitted throughout. So it's hard for them to compromise on that. And I understand that. Like, I understand why or how that would happen. I myself have had to put in a lot of practice to not be a perfectionist at things that don't mean like absolute, they don't mean anything. Like, I would be a perfectionist at planning trips, which doesn't require that much of effort. But it's just like Wesh plans the perfect trips. That's, and it's I think it's about what you think about yourself, then accepting that, oh, this is wrong with me, and I can calm down and work on it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it goes back to that whole thing of solicit feedback and be open to accepting feedback.
Yeah.
There is a
Yes,
concept
exactly. Yeah.
which could be a whole other discussion sometime, but growth mindsets and fixed mindsets,
Of course.
right?
Yeah.
And the
Hardwired.
minute if you feel like, if you that was another realization for me when I
Oh,
first joined
man.
Google, and we would have a lot of these like self-reflection tests or checklists or whatever. So the first time that we did one of these growth mindset, fixed mindset tests, um, I learned that about myself, that I was operating from a fixed mindset. Thankfully, this was early
Oh,
on in my career there.
yeah. Yeah.
And again, I mean, I'm being vulnerable and honest and open here because these
Yeah,
were moments that embarrassed me. Because you think of yourself as,
I
oh,
can
I'm
imagine. Yeah.
and then
I'm very
to have
open.
this,
Yes.
I'm very open, but then you have this test which very clearly says you're operating from a fixed mindset. And so it's like a wake up moment of, "Oh, okay, I didn't expect this about myself, but here's where I am. What do I need to do?" And then it's an acceptance that you are yourself a work in progress, right? And I think that helped. So self-awareness, be open to learning things about yourself, be open to getting feedback, and be open to being wrong sometimes. I mean, hey, we are all human. If we were always right, then where's the fun in anything, right? then there's nothing
There's
left
no
to learn.
growth. If you're always right,
There's no growth.
there's
Yeah,
nothing
there's
left to
no growth.
learn, then there will be no growth. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about your parents and your you know situations with them. I have an almost 10-year-old, and I can very
In
honestly say that I don't think there's been a day that has gone past that I've not learned something from him. Right from,
Yeah.
small things that you remember, right? I remember him being not even two, like when he just first started speaking, maybe he was 2 years old, something very little. I remember meeting some friends at a restaurant, and we walked out of this restaurant, and this was San Francisco. And, you know, we are a bunch of adults, and here's this one baby with us. We are all talking as we walk out of the restaurant. And the baby looks up and says, "Crow." And all of us paused in that moment because none of us had even noticed or heard the crow. None of us had, we were all busy with our chatter. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
always remember that moment because we all paused, we looked at each other, and then my husband said something. There's a saying in their language, something about which loosely translates to the fact that a child's ears are clean. A child hears things and notices things for the first time that we don't even notice because
Yeah, of
we are
course.
so consumed in our own conversations, so we are not open to
Our brains are
other input.
hardwired to, yeah.
Brains are hardwired. And, there
Yeah.
have been multiple learning moments like that where that crow was just like, oh, so living in that moment, living in the present moment
Mm-hmm.
is so important. Being mindful is so important. Be open to like, be a blank slate where everything is an input is a wonderful
Oh,
place to be.
yes. Yes. It's, yeah, like I feel like I would want to be that for like the rest of my life, even if I
Yeah,
become a mother or a grandmother.
yeah,
I love that. Love that. I mean, I'm not boasting about myself or anything, but I'm always curious about learning more and more about even different fields or anything in this world. And I feel like that is something different even about our generation. I think we are just a little bit more self aware of our weaknesses, and we're okay with it. Like, we're okay with the fact that this is what is wrong about us. So, other people, I feel like, cannot use it against us. But I don't think this was the case during like my parents' time or even like my older brother. You know, if something was wrong about this person, they would be very subtly in society, like, and especially if you come from like an Eastern or an Asian culture where like
oh, yeah,
societies are more community based.
yeah.
I feel like it is more difficult to accept yourself and for other people to accept the fact that this person knows who she is and she has accepted her flaws as well, so they
So I think
cannot piss me off about myself.
Yeah, I think I mean, you're right. Your generation is very evolved, right? I'm maybe somewhere in the middle, not your parents' generation, not your generation, somewhere in the middle. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like I've been
You're closer
fortunate
to our
enough to be
generation.
mentally. I don't think age-wise, I'm probably closer to your parents' generation. But what I was coming to was I've been fortunate to be in situations or in positions where I've
Uh-huh.
been able to learn and kind of identify with the new woke way of looking at things a little bit, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and I think it's important also to not look at your flaws as something is wrong with you. It's important
Yeah.
to think because it's not something wrong with you. It's just not your strength. But that doesn't mean that it's something wrong with you.
No.
So that should not be your identity, right?
Yeah. No, and a lot of
It's a
times,
concept of the missing tile. Have you heard of the concept of the missing tile?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Like,
have, of
so
course.
so it's like I don't have this, and if you just fixate on that, it
Yeah.
becomes the biggest thing in your life.
The biggest, yeah, like the
Yeah,
emptiness. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And I think your weaknesses a lot of times, like, I feel like this is something that I always think about, which is again a little further away from our topic. But um, if you speak to in interviews for jobs, I feel like there should be more conversation around the other person's psychological perspective as to like what is their attachment style, because something as simple as that would help you understand how this person, what does this person need in their life to feel secure, and what does this person feel insecure about. And I feel like that, even like as you said, that you look at things just as like, oh, that's a weakness that I have, but not like hone in on it. Like it's okay that, that's not my strength. I think a lot of times um these weaknesses are not just because you're bad at something. It's because something must have
Yeah.
happened to you in your childhood, or it's external,
You just didn't have the
and you,
opportunity. You just didn't get to. Yeah.
yeah, or you were conditioned to react the way you react right now to this situation. So it's not really even a weakness that is internal. It is something that you can work on, because like it's not something that you own or you identify with, or you should be like, I am like this.
Yeah.
Just, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, if it's like a, something which is a physical disability, sure, that's you have that and
that's
you
different. Yeah,
learn to, that's very different. But if it's like you said, if it's a conditioning thing, I mean,
for sure.
another thing that I can talk about for hours and hours is just how we gender condition, role condition,
Yeah, I was just going to
culturally,
come to that.
yeah.
Yes.
Um, and then that translates into generations and generations of baggage. Like, this is how my grandmother did it, and therefore this is how my mother did it, and that's how this. And then as a woman, this is how I'm expected to be. Or, again, your
Yeah.
generation, a lot of stuff is changing. But even for me growing up, or even for, I've seen younger cousins, etc., where it isn't important where your passion lies or what you could do or what you could be good at, but it's more of a, you have to be an engineer, or you have to be a doctor, or you have to be an MBA, because the
Yeah.
you know be grateful that you're
That's where
getting
the
this
future.
education and you'll have a job. That's where the future is.
That's where the money is.
That's where the money is. But at
Yeah.
the same time, you're a woman, and therefore these are gender stereotypes that are expected of you as a woman. And how much that messes with your subconscious, and how
Oh God, so
difficult it is
much.
to break away from it, you know. Um, and I can say that even after decades of living overseas, working in multinationals, having the roles and the jobs that I have, that somewhere you still carry that baggage of, oh my God,
Mm,
it's,
I feel you.
yeah, yeah.
It's so true. I mean, I had this conversation just yesterday. I've lived in France for 5, 6 years. So now that I'm back in India, I notice everything. Like a lot of times, like people around you are into your business so much that I'm like, why does this person want to know this about me? Like, why are they questioning me about what I'm doing or where I'm gonna go? And like just recently, yesterday, like I'm engaged. So in India, there is this whole tradition of um, the woman takes the second name from the man, like her
Yes.
husband's name. And and I'm like, I don't want to do that. I'm not gonna do that. And people are surprised by the fact that I'm not gonna do that, and they want me to do it in the name of tradition. And I had to debate it. Like I had to explain others why this is a thing that I am not for. Like, sure, as a woman, if you would like to follow the tradition, I respect you, but it should be a choice,
It
right?
shouldn't be
That
forced. It
like
should not be
you
forced on
can
you. Yeah,
make. It should not be forced upon you, or it should not
yeah.
be an assumption that the woman is going to
Right,
do that. You
right,
know, and this is just like
right.
such a tiny example of inequality, but
But it's your whole
like
identity.
I
Look, at the end of
actually
the day, it becomes
exactly,
who
it's
you
my
are
whole
because that's your name,
identity.
right? Right.
And I'm still talking about the second name. Like, I know that after the marriage, a lot of people, like my mom, they changed their first name as well. You knew that, right? Like, the first name
I,
is also
I, I know that
changed.
some people in some families,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Or maybe because it's a cultural thing that happens in my family, but I know a lot of women who had to change. Like, And it's like an exciting event for them, because during the whole ceremony the pandit will give like new letters, and then everyone will discuss, oh, what would be a good name for her, and then change her name. And now that I say, like, now that I'm saying this, like, it sounds so cruel in my head as I'm
Right.
saying it, but they're happy about it, like, it's like my best friend, she is as woke as I am. But it's a choice that she's thinking. She's like, listen, I've never liked my second name. I want to change it. That
I'm
I
gonna do it.
respect. And
Yeah.
I understand that. Yeah. But like someone assuming that, oh, you know what? Why aren't you going to take your husband's name? And I wanted to say
Yeah.
something else that I cannot say on the podcast right now. But
It's actually
so let's speak
I
more
mean,
about this.
okay.
So, what are your thoughts on pay or gender disparity? And do you think the concepts that we just discussed influence conversations around income that go on in the companies?
Oh my God, a lot, right? Um,
uh-huh.
so y- y- yes, it's obvious. There's again lots of research, lot of data out there on just the gap, the pay gender pay gap, right? But I think in my mind or my experience, my understanding, so much of it has to do with just our conditioning, our cultural conditioning. There's um, some amount of it is changing, but not quick enough, right? Is the gap becoming smaller? From the articles that I've read or the data that I've seen, slightly, it's not changed enough. But let's look at it with for every pay conversation or every pay negotiation, there is a layer of um, what's your cultural background. There is a layer of where you are, what is the role. There is a layer of
Yeah.
what kind of, not just what kind of education or what kind of family you're coming from, but what part. Like, I grew up in a small town in India, and so
Uh-huh.
even though I come from, I feel like a family where I was allowed to have the same opportunities that my brother and cousins did. And I was told that I was in no way any different or no way inferior or anything. But still, there was always this thing of, but you're still a woman and you still have to. And then add on that another layer of who your, you know, who your partner is or who your partner's family is, or once you get married. I mean, to your point, the whole last name situation. So I married someone from a different community in India, right? Different part of the community, all the same religion, but different. They speak a different language. It's a
Confirm.
different culture entirely,
Yeah.
and a much more conservative culture compared to where I come from. And therefore,
Yes.
when I initially did not change my name, it was okay. But then when I was being asked why I had not changed my name, in my head, there was this need to be accepted by this family that would not have chosen me as their daughter-in-law, which is, I mean, it's stupid even to say that, but the fact is that it
Yeah,
plays
I
such a
know.
big role. And for somebody who's, mind you, at that point, I was done with my education. I was working a good job. I met my husband at a post MBA job, and equal
Okay.
level. He had finished his MBA at the same time that I did. We were at the same company, same job, same everything, right? And for whatever it's worth, at that point, even the same salary, because management trainees gotten at the same salary. And then I see the difference, right? Then I saw the difference that happened post that. Um, but I mean, coming back to how
Oh.
we culturally allow ourselves to carry this baggage, is somewhere in my head there was, I want to be accepted by this family. So, okay, fine, I'll change my name. And then that somewhere, then there's always a question of what roles the woman is expected to play versus, oh yeah, the guy
Yeah.
has to have a job. The woman has to, like, how can you be that focused on your career? Nobody ever says that both of you are equally educated or qualified. Why would you not have the same job or the same pay as your husband does? No one ever says that. On the contrary, it's oh, today's Diwali, what are you doing? or what are you doing for the house, or what is the puja happening, or what. So there's always something which will weigh you down and drag you down, and whether or not they intentionally mean it. Then there's the question of family, kids. When is this going to happen? When are you giving
Yeah.
us good news? And it's always the burden that, at least culturally, in our culture, in Asia, in Southeast Asia, etc., it's a big baggage that women end up carrying.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, one thinks that the West is not like that, but the West is very similar. We have a cultural extra baggage, but they have that gender baggage that they're still carrying too.
Yeah, of
And
course.
then when it comes to negotiating for pay, even applying to jobs, I mean, it's a known fact that men are more likely to apply to jobs that they're not a full fit for. Women will be much more like, I don't want to go through the process and get rejected, or I don't want to waste their time and I know I don't fit in till I'm 100% sure that I will get the job. There's a lot
Right.
of studies on it. There's a lot
There
of
was a whole
research that
study
exists
about
on it.
it, right?
So women will apply to jobs when they're 100% qualified, and men will be okay to applying to a job if they have meet only 60% of the qualifications. That was kind of the
Yeah,
study. Then there were a lot
the
of
study, yes.
studies that went on and said it's not that bad. There's it depends. It's a little bit closer in some cases, but the gap exists in things like initially they said, oh, women are just not confident. But then there's more studies that have happened, and it's more like the women don't want to waste time. They don't want to deal with the rejection. They don't want to. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of those factors. But the interesting thing that stands out is women with 7, 8 years of experience will negotiate or be comfortable talking at a salary, um, where a man with 1 or 2 years of experience, like, they consider themselves equal mentally,
That's
culturally,
the, oh
baggage wise.
God,
That's an anecdote I've read somewhere. I don't have all of the research on that, but there is that. Like, it's
that
you
makes
as a woman, you
sense.
have to be almost mid career level to think of yourself
Uh-huh.
as, a new grad out of school. A man would be like, I deserve this much. So why do we allow ourselves to think that we don't deserve it? Because there is some generational baggage that we carry
Yeah,
for,
some
you know,
conditioning.
yeah,
Yeah, it's I saw a video that day that spoke about the fact that since you were a kid, since you were a young daughter, it was inculcated in us that sacrifice is
yeah,
celebrated if you're a woman. And that is so true. Even like small things like don't speak too loudly, don't give your opinions,
yeah,
don't talk
yeah,
back to
right,
us. Oh, she's gonna help her mom.
right,
Whereas the son is
right,
going off and like having
right,
fun.
right,
So if she does that,
right.
she's a good girl. She's an accepted girl. But if she doesn't do that, she's a
She's
spoiled girl, or she's a bratty woman.
she's a rebel.
And
She's a
it's, I
brat.
think,
She's
yeah,
yeah,
she's a rebel. Yeah, a rebel. So it's so like deep rooted in us. I think from years and years and years, we've just seen like our moms and our grandmoms just sacrifice so much, and be celebrated for that. Like if a woman is
yeah.
standing in the kitchen alone cooking food for 8 people in the house, and that's a lot of food,
That's
because like
that's an
we do
expected.
the chapatis.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's a
right.
great, and if she cooks good food, that's when she would be, oh, she's a great mom. She cooked such good food for so many people, you know?
Yeah,
And that, like, that's the high standard, which is the standard of acceptability for an average woman, which is so sad. But at the same
it's almost
time,
unreal, right? And then when the playing
yeah,
field somewhere gets leveled, so think of the dichotomy in this. You grow up with the conditioning that don't speak up, don't speak back, don't push back, don't this, don't that. Good girls don't. I went to a convent school, and what were we told?
same.
Girls must be seen and not heard, right? Constantly,
Yeah,
girls must be
yeah,
seen and not heard. Girls must be seen and not heard. And then the feedback you get as you're growing in your career and you move to, big companies, big roles, big responsibilities, be more assertive, speak up, push back, be more
yeah,
assertive. And it's like, wait, how do you break that stereotype in your own head? It is, I still
yeah.
don't know how to do that. I'm still, I still
Struggling
have
with that.
anxiety when, yeah, and here I am over 50 with, you talk about my illustrious career and everything. I still struggle with, I still get given feedback to be more assertive, and I'm still like, I don't know how to do it. I will speak up,
Uh,
but I can't, I'm not as loud as everybody else. I'm not as opinionated and aggressive as everybody
as
else.
yeah,
And
and it's
it's a
okay.
struggle,
Of course, it's a struggle. I mean, imagine the
yeah,
number of years that your brain has been forced to spend to accept
yeah,
that you have to be quiet, you have to be a good girl, and like girls should uh not be heard but seen. So it is only fair that it will at least take you half those number of years to unlearn that, for your brain to
right,
unlearn that conditioning. So of course you're gonna struggle with this.
yeah.
It's just such a bad foundation to make strong women.
But I think it's such an important learning lesson for our generation, your generation, as you're growing up, and you'll have your own family down the road, to not pass
Yeah.
that on to the next generation, right?
Yes.
To let them be them. To it's okay to not fit the box or the mold, or the it's okay to be
Yeah.
whoever you are. And
Just be who
as
you are. Like,
yeah,
forget the
it's
world and the
difficult though, and
expectations.
as as a mother today, I can tell you it's difficult to not become your own parents and just be saying the same things over and over again. And which is
I'm
where,
sure. Yeah.
when I say that every day has been a learning experience, it's because I absolutely actively make myself apologize when I'm in the wrong. I make my, if there's been a something that's happened, we won't go 3 days without talking. No way. We'll go maybe 3 minutes, and then I'll go knock at the door and be like, all right, come here, hug, kiss, I love you. What did I do wrong?
Yeah.
What can I do
I'm
differently?
sorry. Yeah.
And I'm sorry. And, I should not have lost my cool
Goodness.
there. And mind you, this is a 9-year-old, right? So I'm not even talking about a grown-up teenager or an adult with,
Yeah.
stronger opinions. But I'm willing to do that because I very consciously do not want to pass on any conditioning that way.
Trauma. Yeah.
Trauma. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. I think that's why I love um what is going on around me. Like, thankfully, I'm surrounded by people who are trying so hard to normalize just to normalize not passing on your generational trauma. So, I will move on to our last question, which is there any final message or advice that you would like to give to our listeners?
So much, right? I can keep talking forever and ever when we
Yes.
covered so many different areas. But I think I want to kind of tie it back to our psychological safety topic, or our, the difference between a
Sure.
manager and a leader topic. Um, it's a
Yeah.
it's a huge responsibility to have a team that depends on you to be in that leadership position. And if there's one thing that I want to send listeners away with today, it would be to take that role seriously. I mean, take that role humbly, take that role seriously, because you're shaping the careers of these people. And think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
for people that have a 30 something year career, if you can be the one person that they look back at and say, this person made a difference in my life and got me to where I am today, that's a huge honor, right? So
Yeah.
be humble, be open to feedback. Remember that not everybody on your team is the same as you, definitely. Remember that not everyone on the team needs to be managed the same way. So you have to learn each person's, who's an introvert, who's an extrovert, who needs what kind of prep background. You can't put an introvert on the spot in a meeting and say, hey, what do
Yeah.
you think about this? Doesn't work like that. Don't pass your anxiety off on people. Um, the other and very important piece is their career development, right? I
Yeah.
think one of the things that I learned, and thankfully through experience with other good managers, or just how I have learned or tried to grow in my own space is my team's career development. While it is my responsibility, it is actually even more their responsibility. It's their career. They're in the driver's seat of their
Yeah.
career. My job is to enable them to get to where they want to get to. I should not be sitting here and saying,
Yeah.
Vaishnavi, you should be this in 2 years, right? I could maybe see that potential and tell you, hey, have you considered this? But Vaishnavi needs to come and tell me, I want to try this out. And my job is to remove roadblocks, help you network, connect you, give you whatever opportunity, even if that means you're going to leave my
Yeah.
team and go away to do something bigger, right? And
True.
I can't stress that enough. It's way too often we'll end up, we mess up the whole psychological safety because we want to keep those people on our team producing for us because it makes us look good.
Yeah.
But the fact is that
Selfish
when
reasons.
a team member, it can be a very selfish place to be, because when you operate from a place of ego, it's just my team produces well, it's good, I look good in front of my managers. Whereas if you're looking
Yeah.
at it as your role is an enabler, and these are people who are depending on you to get ahead in their careers,
Well,
let them get ahead. And,
yeah.
the satisfaction you get out of that is a whole different level, right? Yes, you could continue to be
Definitely.
successful with numbers and production and whatever else it is. But the satisfaction of seeing your team members grow into their complete potential is unmatched.
I agree. That was a beautiful insight. Thank you, Indu, for sharing your expertise with us. It's been an enlightening conversation. Is there something that you want to add?
No, I think this was really, really
Okay.
helpful and good. And I
I'm
hope we
glad
have more chats.
you think so. Oh yeah, 100%. We should definitely do like a part 2 because there is so much
Yeah.
that we did not cover. And yeah, that wraps our interview with Indo, a distinguished HR professional with deep knowledge and brilliant experience. Thank you for sharing it with us. And thank you for all the listeners for joining us. Stay tuned for more such discussions. Until next time.
Thank you for staying until the end. If you liked our conversation, go ahead and follow Zapilio on LinkedIn for more such content.